Hi, everyone. My name is Thea Miller-Ryan. I am the director of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of South Dakota. I'm based in Sioux Falls. I would like to welcome you all to on behalf of the South Dakota Humanities Council, which produces the annual Festival of Books. We are so pleased you've joined us for our virtual 2020 event. Before this event gets underway, I need to share some housekeeping details with you. If you'd like to ask questions or share comments with today's presenter, please type them in the chat section on Zoom, which you can open by clicking on the conversation bubble. It's usually at the bottom of your screen, or in the comments section on Facebook. I will pass along as many as possible at the end of the session. We'll also likely allow you to turn on your audio and video at the end of this session so that you can ask your questions directly. In addition to the festival presentations like this one, we invite you to visit our virtual exhibitors hall. It's an event on the South Dakota Humanities Council Facebook page where you can learn more about our many authors, publishers, cultural organizations, and you can win prizes in the process. You can buy books by our presenting authors at Zandbro's Varieties Special online festival bookstore, zandbros.com. If you're looking for some of the children's books associated with the festival, that will be at Child's Play Toys, childsplaytoyssf.com. You'll find buttons at sdbookfestival.com that will take you directly to our booksellers, and we will also include links in this chat. To help us continue to improve the festival, we would appreciate if you would fill out an evaluation form. We will email you the link to this form at the conclusion of the festival, and you can find a link in the chat section on Zoom. Finally, you can help keep the festival free by making a tax-deductible donation to the South Dakota Humanities Council. Just visit our website, sdhumanities.org, O-R-G, and click the donate button. This festival would not be possible without the generous support of the numerous organizations and individuals who have already donated and are acknowledged on the back of the cover of the festival guide and on our website. Now, on with the show. This program is called What to Do When the Muse Wakes You Up. Our speaker today is Phyllis Cole Dye. Phyllis began pecking away on a manual typewriter in childhood and never stopped. In her work, she seeks to write across what divides us. Her most recent book, For the Sake of One We Love and Are Losing, a meditative poem and journal. Her other titles include the historical novel Beneath the Same Stars and the anthology Poetry of Presence, edited with Ruby Wilson. Originally from Ohio, Cole Dye, Phyllis, now resides with her scientist husband, her teenage son, and 2 cats in a 130-year-old house in Brookings, South Dakota. Welcome, Phyllis. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Thea. It's wonderful to be here, and I want to thank all of you who are part of the session or who might be watching a recording of this. The South Dakota Festival of Books is always a fabulous event, and even in the middle of a pandemic, it's going to be fabulous, and I'm really glad to be part of it. And you folks are the reason why we're here. So you make the festival. I hope you can find ways of supporting it with your presence and with your dollars. So I'm going to make a presentation that I'm going to start as soon as I screen share here. Hopefully you'll be able to see that okay. And then if you could save your questions for the end, I'm really looking forward to our conversation at that point. So everybody's fingers are now crossed that this works the way it's supposed to, right? Just give me a second. And okay, so far so good. Can everybody see that? Okay, what to do when the muse wakes you up. In classical mythology, as you're probably aware, the muses were goddesses whose abundant artistic talents and extraordinary beauty inspired passion in men to create literature, music, and more. Today, this sounds just a wee bit sexist, doesn't it? Yet the tradition of the Muses points to the fact that inspiration plays a pervasive and powerful role in artistic endeavor. Now, today I'm defining the Muse as any source of inspiration for a creative act that seems to lie outside or beyond oneself. It can be known by many names. I mean, each of those traditional goddesses had their own name. And today we might call the Muse spirit, the divine, mystery, nature, a messenger from the unconscious, but I keep falling back on that old word muse. Our muse might even be an actual person, perhaps someone we regard as our beloved, though as this cartoon suggests, that source of inspiration doesn't always pan out. Now, Nebraska poet Marjorie Sizer delightfully describes the Muse as a little girl, impossibly polite. She arrives when you're talking or walking away from your car. She's barefoot. She stands next to you, mute. She taps your sleeve, not even on your skin, just touches the cloth of your plaid shirt, touches it twice. She feels with her index finger the texture, and you keep talking. Or you don't. She will wait 1 minute. She is not hungry or unhappy or poor. She goes somewhere else, unless you turn and look at her and write it down. I'm kidding. She's a horse you want to ride. She's a tall horse. She's heavy, as if she could bear armor. You can't catch her with apples. I don't know how you get on. I remember my cold fingers in the black mane. Isn't this poem wonderful? Ruby Wilson and I just had to include it in Poetry of Presence, our acclaimed anthology of mindfulness poems. Now, if you were to ask me to name the muse behind Poetry of Presence, I'd have to say it was consolation. You see, I traced the inspiration for that book to when I was brokenhearted. A serious music project that meant a lot to me had just blown up in my face, taking with it a close friendship. Those twin losses totally altered the landscape of my creative life. For months, I couldn't compose any music. For months, I was adrift with no sense of direction. Then I turned to the consolation of poetry, and not just any poetry, but mindfulness poetry, accessible poetry that speaks to the heart as well as to the head. Poetry that invites us to bring our whole self to whatever moment we're in and truly live it, even if we would rather hide or run away or give up. Poetry that grants us a taste of being good enough just as we are in this world, just as it is. I became obsessed, scavenging around in the wide realm of poetry for such mindfulness nuggets. I'd collected more than 1,000 of them before I noticed the muse standing next to me, this little girl touching the texture of my plaid shirt. She didn't say a word. The question was in her eyes. May we have an anthology, please? Other times, as Marge Sizer says in her poem, the muse is not a quiet child, but a big wild horse that you don't know how to mount, let alone ride. You just have to bury your fingers in its black mane and hold on. That's the way it was when I was writing Beneath the Same Stars, my historical novel based on actual events related to the 1862 US-Dakota War. It took me 6 years to research and write that book. And as I was writing those central characters in that novel, a white woman named Sarah Wakefield and her Dakota protector, Chaskey, both of them actual people, I felt that both of them were hovering over my shoulder. 6 years it took me. It was a gut-wrenching time, realizing that the tragic past is not dead, that the mistakes that we made 150, 200, 400 years ago, we're still making today. I dreamed about Sarah and Chaskey. I talked to them. When I got stuck, I implored their help. So you won't be surprised when you find out that I call the muse behind that book the ancestors. A muse in the guise of an even wilder horse had visited me years before, leading to the emptiness of our hands. My friend and co-author James Murray and I wrote this memoir about 47 days that we lived by choice on the streets of Columbus, Ohio, the nation's 15th largest city, and at the time, home for us both. The book provides a window on what being without a home can do to a person, even somebody who, like James and me, seemingly starts out with every advantage. Now, I had never aspired to giving up my home for a season of my life. But one morning, the muse that I call the thing with a capital T came down and demanded that I do just that. As I say in the introduction to the book, the thing comes, the calling, if you will, and you realize deep down it's come for you, and you can't turn your back or toy with it. The thing demands you take it up with single-minded passion, even though you never asked for it or even want it. You don't ask why it has come, for who would know the answer? And besides, the why doesn't matter. You trust the thing totally, and that's enough. Finally, you don't ask how you'll survive it if the thing is hard and will break your heart. Now is not the time for asking that, but for telling your husband that this is what you've been given to do. Those 47 days on the streets of Columbus demanded of James and me nearly everything that we had to give. We came home broken. From that brokenness, 6 months later, we began to write. We had to write. The thing had laid its claim on us. Well, if you can't tell by now, I love the biographies of my books, these and all the others I've written. My books are like spiritual godchildren, little ones the muses placed in my care long before their birth by publication. I treasure the story of how each of them came to be. I thrill to watch them taking on lives of their own since spreading their wings and leaving the nest. The story of my latest book involves my most striking encounter with a muse yet. Early this past February, boy, that seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? I was in San Diego on a personal writing retreat. I take a retreat like that every winter, just a couple of weeks somewhere that's warmer and greener than South Dakota, a booster shot, you might say, to help me get through until spring. And this time around, I had rented this tiny but cute Airbnb pool house in which to labor over my novel in progress. This ceramic art piece, by the way, was hanging on the garden fence just outside the door. Kind of an auspicious sign, don't you think? A woman who has stripped herself down to her most vulnerable for the sake of a book. Anyway, one night, about halfway through my retreat, I had a dream. I dreamed that my aunt had invited multitudes of family members to a reunion at her house. Once gathered there, we realized that she was dying, and she'd actually summoned us to say goodbye. She asked us to gather around her bed. In dreams, multitudes can easily do that. She handed us a very old book with a turquoise cover. Its text was handwritten in ink on parchment. The title was "For the Sake of One We Love and Are Losing." As my relatives and I read the book aloud, in dreams, multitudes can easily do that together, we discovered that it was a long meditative poem. The words of the poem evoked in us a profound sense of love and kinship. The intensity of that shared feeling woke me up. "Write down the words," the muse said to me, not in a voice I could hear, but in a voice nevertheless. "I'll call this muse the Muse of Dreams." "It's too cold to get out of bed," I said. "Write them down." "I need to go back to sleep." "Write them down. In the morning. You'll never remember them. Write them down now." I gave up arguing. I reached for a journal and a pen. Sensing that turning on a light might destroy the web of words already so fragile in my recollection, I scribbled in the dark, there in my bed beneath the skylight. Suddenly, I was frantic to get the poem's lines onto paper. I wrote as fast as I could in whatever order I remembered them. And when I couldn't recover any more from my memory, I dropped back to sleep as if somebody had pulled my plug. This is a snippet from one page of my scribblings. The blue ink is from that night. The red ink is from when I shaped the poem once I'd returned home from my retreat. It took about an hour of editing, arranging the lines, adding words or phrases to fill gaps in the flow, deleting what made no sense. I sent my draft of the poem to several poet friends for feedback. To be honest, I couldn't be objective about it. Much as I believe in the muse, the whole episode felt a little crazy. I needed their candid appraisals of the text. Their overwhelming response: "You have to find a way to share this."
For the sake of one we love and are losing. For the sake of one we love and are losing, we will not be afraid. But when we are afraid, we will embrace what we fear, as if it were a lost child crying in our arms. We will not walk away from what needs to be seen and cared for. We will not walk away. For the sake of one we love and are losing, we will praise. We will speak words of light. We will let our thoughts rise like a ring of smoke widening into blue sky. For the sake of one we love and are losing, We will let go the things we do not understand. We will set regrets like candles upon the still waters to float away on their own time. We will hang old wounds upon distant stars whose light can absorb their weight. All these will pass beyond our need to see. For the sake of one we love and are losing, we will not cling. We will hold the hand gently. We will wrap the body with fresh linens. We will lay our head upon the shoulder. We will bless the forehead with tears and kisses. All that has gone unspoken, because it could not be said before, will be said by this. For the sake of one we love and are losing, we will suffer the final limits of our devotion. Death we cannot control. Death we cannot fix. This is the rock upon which we are split. We cannot rise, yet still we will rise to do the one more impossible thing. For the sake of one we love and are losing, we will ready ourselves to be more alone. This is not a betrayal of the beloved. It is acceptance of the branching paths on the journey shared. Before the great farewell, we will break bread together. We will draw water from the well and lift it to one another's lips. What we need is here. Each day that we have danced and endured, every certain step and stumble has prepared us for just this. We will be present within the goodbye so long as it lasts. We do not know how perfectly we can love through our imperfections. We cannot know what we are made of until they who have helped make us leave us. For the sake of one we love and are losing, we will go. We will make our parting, not knowing how. The road ends just ahead, but the land goes on. The land goes on like mercy, out and around, forever. I'm Phyllis Coldeye, and this is the poem For the Sake of One We Love and Are Losing.
I have no idea why the Muse of Dreams brought this poem to me. But a month later, COVID-19 hit our country hard. I can't explain it, but I don't think that's a coincidence. Especially now, With the pandemic often preventing us from being with those we love as they're dying, or from gathering as we would like to mourn their loss, this poem can help us say what we need to say. It can help us grieve what we need to grieve. I can't take any credit for this work. I'm only responsible for putting it forth. Poet Barbara Crooker says that within the pages of this beautiful book, we have instructions on how to be fully present with the dying. Marianne Murphy Zarzana describes it as a life raft to carry you to the other side of your grief. James Cruz is a simple yet profound companion for the grief journey each of us must face. Rosemary Watola Tromer says simply, I wept at the truth of it. For the Sake of One We Love and Are Losing is now available as both a special edition book and a matching condolence card at my website. My book designer helped me honor the dream as best as I could within my budgetary constraints. The book's richly textured cover is turquoise. Its text is presented in a handwritten font on elegant paper. Its pages provide ample space for journaling and attaching photographs, should the reader desire. Now, with all of this background, what do we do when the muse wakes us up? When inspiration comes as a surprise visitor, as if from beyond ourselves. I'd like to offer a few suggestions. This will not be an exhaustive list by any means, but I'm hoping that when I finish, perhaps you'll have your own wisdom to add, or perhaps questions for us to discuss together. When the muse wakes you up, first of all, welcome the muse as a dear friend and esteemed guest, even when it's inconvenient, perhaps especially when it's inconvenient. Would you ever leave such a friend standing on your stoop in the middle of the night because you didn't want to be bothered? Of course not. Hearing their voice, you would run to the door. Next, trust that the muse is bringing you something important. The muse will not knock on your door at 3 a.m. to remind you to do the dishes or to finish the crossword puzzle in the Times. The muse wants to deliver something of value, maybe something so valuable you feel unworthy or incapable of it. Suspend your self-doubt. The muse will only bring what you're ready for. Let me say that again. The muse will only bring what you're ready for. Next, immediately honor the muse's gift. Whatever the gift is, express your gratitude in some way that feels appropriate. Jot it down in your journal, talk it into your phone, confide it in a trusted friend, some such thing. Try not to push the gift away, making excuses like I did at first in San Diego, saying, oh, I'll deal with it later. The muse of procrastination is no muse at all. She's a trickster. If the muse of dreams, who brought For the Sake of One We Love and Are Losing, had not been persistent with me and kept nagging at me, I'd have missed that gift completely. It would literally never have seen the light of day. Next, work with whatever the muse has brought you. Sometimes your memory of the muse's gift will be partial. That's when you remember only fragments of a dream. Other times, your old habits of thinking and creating will distort or block the muse's message. And frequently, the muse will bring only threads of an idea when you want an elaborate tapestry. So be prepared to collaborate with the muse, bringing all your skills to bear on the unfinished gift you've received. I'll say it again. The muse will only bring you what you're ready for, and whatever she brings will be enough to get you started. Next, spare the muse any cravings you might have for personal gain from the gift. Remember the little girl in Marge Sizer's poem? Marge says, the muse isn't hungry or unhappy or poor. Remember the horse, tall and heavy as if she could wear armor? I mean, the muse is not visiting you out of her need, and she hasn't come to meet your needs either. The muse comes to meet the needs of the world. I believe this with all my heart. Next, keep asking the muse for help, seriously. Don't just sit around waiting for the muse to drop by again. Like any relationship, this one takes work. The more you seek out the muse's help, the more you'll find it. I know this from experience. And the simplest way to ask for help is to show up every day in your favorite creating space and actually write or compose or whatever the creative thing is that you do. Do it even if only for a few minutes, even if you don't much like what you're producing. Simply by showing up, you signal to the muse that you still care, that you're still paying attention. Eventually, the muse will reward you. Finally, at least for this list, allow the muse to change you, even radically. I can't emphasize this enough. You know, every creative project that I've ever undertaken has changed me. By the time I finish, I'm more myself than when I began. That's one reason I really love to make stuff. By some magical alchemy, the stuff I'm making for the world also helps to make me. Here's an example. Starting way back in second grade, I wanted to be a poet. And all the way through primary school and secondary school, I had at least one teacher every year who was encouraging my efforts. But midway through college, for reasons I won't bother you with, I slammed the door shut on my dream of becoming a poet and locked it up tight. I still wrote an occasional poem, usually as a gift, but whenever somebody referred to me as a poet or described my prose books as poetic, I brushed the comments aside. Now, as a result of the muse's visitation that night in San Diego, that door marked poetry inside me that I slammed shut so long ago has blown wide open. Not only that, but adjacent doors in my spirit are also creaking open, hidden doors that I never even knew were there. So I urge you to pay close attention to your life. If you do, the muse will visit you, I promise. Whenever you feel the muse nudge, whatever form the nudge takes, be swift to acknowledge it. Be grateful enough to trust it. Be brave enough to follow it. Say to the muse with humility, teach me, show me the way. If you do, your life may never be the same. Thanks so much for listening to my prepared remarks. Now we get to the really fun part. I'm going to stop my screen sharing. If I can, whoops. There we go. So I'm anxious to hear from you now, and the best way we can do that, Thea. Down in the chat, oh, wait a minute. Are you pointing so I should look at the chat? Am I set? You need some help unmuting.
Thank you, got it.
Oh.
Thank you. All right, that was fun.
The muse did that, right?
That's right. They were keeping me silent. We do have, you had a lot of wonderful comments. People have a lot of wonderful things to say about what you wrote, and so and your presentation. So I hope you'll take a minute to read those. There was a question, let's see, from Holly. Did you compose the music as well? And is there a CD of this?
Oh, I wish I could say yes, but no, I borrowed that music from a royalty-free music site. I don't have as much time to do composing as I used to, because everything seems to be flowing toward my writing, but it is a lovely piece of music, and it was perfect for the background to this poem.
It's fantastic. I don't know if people will be able to unmute themselves. If they can, somebody has a question and would like to try. Otherwise, put it in the chat and I'll be glad to relay that. We have a lot of people saying, I loved every bit of this. Another person said, this was like a lightning strike to me, definitely a moment. Thank you for your wisdom and passion and emotion. I will be ordering some of those cards too.
Thank you.
Another
the
person
are set, just so you know, that I sell those in sets of 5, and they're really nicely done. And I really want to thank Choke Cherry Design here in Brookings for helping me with the book and card design.
Super. That is great. Back up toward the top, the emptiness of our hands still informs my thoughts and actions to this day. I read it as soon as it came out.
Wow, that was 3 editions ago.
Wow.
Yeah, that happened a long time ago, but it's still very much a part of me. Those events happened in 1999, but for some reason this story persists, and I still do a lot of presentations on it. It was a transformative event in my life, for sure. So I thank the thing. I'm not sure that James's family ever forgave me for dragging him along with me, so to speak.
Well, Annette says, beneath the same stars is beautifully written and shares a piece of our history that is tragic, devastating, but important to understand.
Yes. Yeah, I think especially these days, we need to be looking, especially as Euro-Americans, those of us who are, need to be looking at the past to see what it reveals about the present, because we're not very well versed in our own history. It's hard to grapple with.
People are saying, love this, love every bit of this. I do have a question from Annette. What were the main things you learned while living on the street?
Oh my, Annette, how dare you ask such a question? So many things. I guess one thing is let go of the outcome of your attempts to help others. You're a partner with them, you're not in charge of them. And so if you want to help, you try to help as best you're able, but you can't invest yourself in a particular outcome of your efforts. A second thing would be that nothing is insignificant. especially when you're present to someone who is very raw and wounded. So things that you do out of your lesser angels are going to perhaps hurt them more than ordinarily. And the kindnesses that you show that seem small to you are going to seem like miracles to them. So just learning to properly value that everything that we think and say and do has consequences, and to be careful about what we're putting out into the world, because nothing is insignificant. Those are a couple of things that come to mind now.
Linda would like to know, what can you tell us about the book you are writing now?
Well, Linda, thank you for that question. The muse has slammed the brakes on that book. I felt very called to do it. It's called The Singing Stick. It gets into some history about Native American boarding schools in the early part of the 1900s. That's what I was working on when the pandemic hit. And the pandemic has changed everything. You know, working on a novel that might take me 3, 4, 5 years to write seems self-indulgent when there is the level of suffering going on because of the pandemic and because of the racist violence in the country and other things. So I need to be working on something more immediate, and that's why I think I'm turning more to poetry and essays right now. I do have a mailing list called the Staying Power mailing list. It's a free weekly mailing that I send out that is a virtual care package for the pandemic. You can get that at my website if you want to. But I also think that the other thing that the dilemmas of the world are doing is making the novel that I was working on shape shift. And so I don't have any clarity about that. And so it feels like the muse is just telling me to let that sit for now, and it'll either take on its new life or it won't. It all depends, I think, on what happens in the world. I've always believed that my role as a creative person is to try to help the world heal. My tagline is writing across what divides us. And so you can't write across every divide. You can't address every crisis that's going on, but right now the enormity of the suffering in the world just is, I cannot write fiction right now. I just can't.
A couple more things that have come in. Holly says about Living on the Street book. I was also struck by how exhausting it is, all the walking involved for basic needs and safety.
It is exhausting, and it's hard on the body. We think we were walking 7 or 8 miles a day just to tend our basic needs, and a lot of that was in bad weather, and it was on asphalt. And after I came off the streets, I had to have surgery on my knee and on my back. So yeah, like I said in my remarks, James and I had to give a lot of ourselves, and it was many years before we felt that we had lived our way into a new normal.
Steve asks, you kind of addressed this before, but it's slightly different. What is your practice when the muse is not making herself known to you?
Show up. Show up. I think we have to, it's kind of going back to the streets there, letting go of the outcome. in our creative work, I think we have to show up without expectations of what's going to happen and without judging what happens. Just let the work happen and rejoice in it. I mean, that's the thing. If you're working on something that is pure torture, I mean, even the books that I've written that were, as I say, gut-wrenching, I believed in them. I knew that's what I was supposed to be doing. And so even when it felt like I'd been abandoned by the muse or that I was lost, you know, it's part of the process. Value the struggle, rejoice in the struggle. The struggle will end.
We have a question that came from Facebook. Elizabeth Gilbert believes that the muse will move on to someone else if it doesn't receive reception. Have you ever seen one of your ideas pop up elsewhere and wonder if that happened?
I have, and I know what you're talking about with Elizabeth Gilbert, and I believe that happens as well. I can't explain it. My proper stance toward mysteries is to be quiet about them, let them be what they are. Some of these things just, they're almost too personal to talk about, but I say, yes, I know what she's talking about. And then there are times when I'm with creative people and we're just jawing, you know, about what we're working on, and there is this synchronicity that we're working on something very similar, and we augment each other, we buoy each other up, we push each other higher or lower into it. I don't know how to describe it, but you know, find those people that take seriously what they do from their spirit. There are a lot of creative people who look at creativity very differently. So maybe you're part of that kind of a tribe. My tribe, it's soul work. It's soul work. And when I'm with other people who, I think the world is hungry for that. And I love being around people who look at creativity in that way.
Annette said, your staying power has been a wonderful spirit lifter for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette.
Paula asked, since this is being recorded, are we able to rewatch it someplace? Paula, I don't have the answer to that, but I believe that they will be posted. I know that this is running simultaneously on Facebook, so I believe you'll be able to watch this on the South Dakota Humanities Council Facebook page as well following this.
I'm glad for that question. I didn't know that. So thank you, Paula.
And Donna says, you are a blessing.
Thank you, Donna. So are you. Does anybody out there have stories of their own about the Muse, or how they advice about how they work with the Muse that you want to share with me or with the people who are watching?
Well, since you ask, I'm Betty Sheldon. I live in Aberdeen, and I do visual art work primarily, some writing. This is one of those things that happens when the Muse kind of finds some of us who are open. Yesterday, I carried a box of things into my house that I knew were there, but I didn't know exactly what was in them. They were things my brother gave me when he was clearing out things. And in there were some photos of my parents and siblings, some of which I'd never seen before. And the more I looked, the more I remembered, was it about a year ago, I think, I just happened onto some old pictures then too of family and decided I would use them as a reference for painting, not to paint what was there, but what wasn't there.
Oh.
Because I delved into them and then my Muse showed up. And I literally, there were times when she took control of my brush.
Yes.
And these are ghost-like paintings in a way, and they have touched people who've seen them, and they touch me. Now I have this new cache of old photos and winter's almost here. And I anticipate that my muse and I, and she is my great-great-grandmother.
Really?
Yes, that's what I can hardly talk about it because I get so pent up with emotion, but I have roots on the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate and the Upper and Lower Sioux agencies, and I've always known of her, but now she's visiting me. She visited me several years ago when some crazy friends and I were having a seance kind of thing with a homemade Ouija board contraption. We were about to give it up, and all of a sudden she jumped in and started spelling her name. And my other two friends were aware of her because I'd talked about her. And I'd never experienced anything responding to a Ouija board. And I said, "Grandma Sophie, is that you?" And she zipped across the table and said, "Yes." And then my friend was sitting there and I said, "I don't know what to do." And she said, "Ask her something more." So it was a few brief moments. But then when we stopped, when it was gone, my friend knew that Grandma Sophie was Dakota. And while she saw this happening, she said she heard drum beats in the distance and she heard jingle dresses. I mean, make of it what you will. And then here, probably 3 or 4 years later. So somebody had suggested, as you did, to welcome the muse. So I have an abalone shell, which I've never been traditionally Dakota, but I have started studying the language these last few years and immersing myself in history and meeting many of my relatives. So I took my abalone and I lit my sage and I walked into my studio, saging myself, and talked to her. And I called her by name and I said, "I know you're here. And please be with me again." And so we'll see what happens.
Bless you, Betty. Wow.
Yeah, my mother never was able to speak much of what she knew, but I do know that in her retirement with my dad, they went over to the areas where the uprising occurred. My grandmother was driven out of Morton, Minnesota during the Dakota Uprising in 1862. And rescued, and she lived to be 93 years old. And what she went through, she had 10 children, some of them born when she was in her 40s, and survived all of that. So it's precious to me, and I just could hardly believe my ears when I heard you speaking. And I got here late. I was on another Zoom, but so I missed your introduction. But I will be at your website, and I'm very interested in the book you have written about the Dakota history.
And our paths will cross again. We've been in meetings together.
Yes, we have. Exactly. That's why I came today, because I recognized your name and who you are. So thank you so much. I didn't mean to take so much time. It's hard to tell that without using too many words.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for trusting us with that. And she'll be there.
Yes, I can hardly wait to get my fall things done so I can start painting again.
Phyllis, we also have a note here from Holly. She said, "I wrote a Christmas pageant in 2 days. The muse woke me up at 4 a.m. one morning and I wrote until I absolutely had to get ready to work, get ready and leave for work. 2 days later, at the end of the day, the muse told me to sit down and finish. Our church produced the pageant that year. Most of the children memorized their lines too." Amazing.
Isn't that great? Is this Holly Mosley?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Wow. So is that something that you have sought since then? Have you tried to dig into more writing and meet your muse?
I'm struck by lines. In fact, my husband said one this morning, and I said, "Okay, that's a poem." And I wrote it down, and the second line came to me, but I was getting ready to go to one of these sessions. But I'm actually going to read at the open mic tonight a poem that came to me the way the light was falling, and for some reason it connected me to memories of my dad. when I was little and what he would do, and with light, and that, when I was young, I had a poem that just came to me, and it was like you talked about. It was what you said. When inspiration comes as a visitor from beyond ourselves. I mean, to this day, I say, I held the pen, but I did not write that poem. And it's very powerful. And I love what you said about creativity being soul work. I'm actually, well, I kind of abandoned it for a while, but it keeps calling me back. I'm trying to write a fiction book about what happened in Minneapolis with the protests starting there and COVID. And I have created a little town in another book I didn't finish, but I'm like, I got to go back to that town to figure out how to live through COVID myself. And so I started that, and the muse keeps saying, hello, come back.
Sure.
So, I just loved your talk today. Thank you. And you have been an inspiration and encouragement in so many ways. You came and spoke to our youth group about the emptiness of our hands.
What
in
was that?
Calvary Cathedral, Sioux Falls.
Sioux Falls. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not there anymore. That was many, many years ago, but
Years ago.
you've been a powerful presence for me, and I've loved encountering you again at the Festival of Books. So thank you.
Thank you, Holly. And you know what strikes me as I'm hearing you and Betty talk and some of the other comments is like we have these really intensely personal experiences with the muse that make us create, and it feels so much like we have been there in the middle of that, and yet it speaks beyond. You know, when you start talking about the way the light falls and it brings a memory of your dad, it's like I was right there with you, you know, and I'm sure when I read that poem, it's going to take me. So it becomes, the personal becomes the universal. I think that's when the work is coming out of the soul. I think that's what happens, and I love it.
What struck me about putting on the Christmas pageant, I was also the Christian ed director, and so I was directing the pageant and working with the children. You know, there's some Bible stories you don't tell children, like the slaughter of the innocents. And I kind of wrote it for the kids. You know, I knew which characters I wanted to play what, and they all showed up, which was amazing in itself, because some of those kids were never in a Christmas pageant before or after. And the guy who played King Herod, he was a 5th grader, and he nailed it. He nailed the severity and the meanness and the selfishness. And the other kids are like, oh my gosh, stop him, he's too mean. And I said, and I gathered them all in the pews, and I said, there's a story we haven't told you about Jesus's birth, and it's sad, but I feel like I should tell it to you now. And when I got done telling them the story of the slaughter of the innocents, they all turned to this kid and said, you're perfect, keep at it. And just the education that went on, and that they were all so committed. And I mean, we had the 3 wise men having a little tea party as they talked about the star they'd seen. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And it was so, the whole process, it was probably one of the easiest pageants I ever had to put on with the kids, because it was different enough and familiar enough, and they loved it.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And then it inspired an 8th grader the next year to say, can I help you write the pageant this year? And can we make it a real pageant, you know, like a beauty pageant? And so we had a talent contest, and we had a crowning, and it was real. And, you know, and people kept saying, is there really a dinosaur in the Christmas pageant this year? One little kid's talent was to roar like a dinosaur, and his grandma made him a costume. And we hadn't rehearsed this, but he came out between the choir stalls, and he turned to them and he roared. He was only like 2 or 3, and he roared, and as a body, the whole choir, even though they didn't know this was coming, all went, oh! I had one person tell me they thought that was the best pageant they'd ever seen, and she used to direct them too and write them, so it was great. So it started a creative process for a lot of people, and it's wonderful to see it spread like that too.
It's contagious. It's
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of that. I know that we have probably to maybe get to the next session at 5 o'clock. I don't want to keep people if they need. I know I'm hurrying off to one soon, but Thea, is there anything else we need to do before?
No, Jennifer just wanted me to tell you, Jennifer from the Festival of Books, that as soon as the live stream ends, the recording will be of this session will be available under videos on the South Dakota Humanities Council Facebook page. So you will, yes, you will be able to catch it.
I just again want to thank everybody for coming, and I hope that we meet again.
Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you so much. Everyone, let's cheer. Have a great evening, everyone. We'll see you at the festival this weekend.
Stay healthy.
Yes.